Right. Welcome, everybody, to our very first episode of Meaning Over Mugs, where you get these four fine young gentlemen. We're going to be talking about some movies and some of the cool themes, the cool soapboxes, as we call them, the whys of a story, some things that are unforeseen that you probably didn't think about that existed in these movies, or maybe you did. And I'd like to introduce you to our panel. We have to my top left is Houston Howard, and he is a creator. He is a professor at several colleges for transmedia design and movies and scripts and all that fun stuff. And we got Mattlock London. This guy is the true hustler, independent filmmaker, doing some big things. And Rory Partin. This guy is actor, singer, songwriter extraordinaire, Michael Bublé type sound. Look him up. And you got your boy T Rev.
That's it.
I just like to be here. I do a little bit of everything. I have some good opinions. Check me out. So let's jump into this, gentlemen. Let's give them something, hopefully that they like.
First of all, two observations. One, I feel like Mattlock's beard should have its own Zoom window. That just says Mattlock's beard, just in a completely separate Zoom window. And then, Trav, I like how your mug says coffee, just in case you forget. Right? It's just
Which mug am I going to use today?
Right? It's just
coffee.
Yeah, your mug says is labeled coffee. Rory's library has reference label right there, just in case he forgets the reference books, just in case you forget the coffee.
This isn't a sign of getting older, is it?
Am I the only one that doesn't label everything? I don't know. I don't label enough things in my life, apparently. So hopefully everybody has their coffee. Sort of the impetus of this show is remember back in the days when we could go to a coffee shop and actually have conversations with other human beings. And so we long for the good old days. It seems like we're moving back toward that. But while we're still in the midst of COVID, we decided to do a digital coffee shop and have that coffee shop conversation. We can have the conversation. We can have coffee. We just can't be close together, apparently. So today we're going to be talking about a movie that's in pop culture right now, kind of digging into it. And I like to always phrase it this way: is the plot is what a movie's about, right? But it's not what it's really about. And there's always, like, when we're talking about what something's really about, it's like when we pop the hood and kind of dig deep, and that there's an analysis that goes along with that most people I don't think do. But I was always sort of one of those guys that even as a kid, I like to do that, right? And I was telling Travis recently that what I love to do is if I were to design my perfect birthday, I would do batting cages. I love to go to the batting cages on my birthday, but I would like take a bunch of friends, go to the movies, watch a movie, but then it's not just watch the movie, go to the coffee shop after the movie and then talk about the movie. My wife thinks that's the nerdiest, weirdest thing on the planet. But I'm like, I don't need a cake. I like to kind of dig in and discuss. And I'm just one of those guys that would take like 4 hours just to sit there and talk about, scene to scene, what it means and things like that. So thank you for you guys for indulging me with this. And today we're going to be talking about a movie that has been in pop culture, that has sort of come back into pop culture just in the past week, which is something called Hillbilly Elegy. And Hillbilly Elegy is a Ron Howard film based off a book by J.D. Vance, and it was a New York Times bestseller by J.D. Vance, turned into a feature film by Ron Howard back in I think he wrote the book in 2016, but it hit Netflix just a couple months ago to a lot of controversy, actually, and that we'll talk about. And but just recently, just came back into the news for a couple of reasons. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to give a very clear spoiler alert. Anybody that doesn't want to be, I mean, I don't think anybody cares about spoilers for Hillbilly Elegy necessarily, not right? But
there might be somebody holding out.
But just in case, just in case, here's the time, here's your opportunity to bail. Go watch the movie. Jump back into this video later at this point. But Hillbilly Elegy was actually a movie that I was excited about because excited to see because it's set exactly where I'm from originally in Kentucky. Usually Hollywood butchers Appalachia, capturing Appalachia, right? I think there's only been a couple movies that really captured Appalachia in a great way. One was Winter's Bone. I don't know if you guys saw Winter's Bone with Jennifer Lawrence back in the day. That really was a good window into that world. I was excited to see this, and because Amy Adams, I love Amy Adams. Ron Howard, I think, is just one of the best directors in Hollywood. So I was excited to see this film, but then it was met with like an immense amount of criticism when it was released, primarily because of the politics surrounding it. And I'll tell you what I did. I went like the full Monty with this film, guys. I watched the film, and then after I watched the film, I went and read the book. Right, which is something I don't really do. Sometimes I go from book to movie. I've never gone movie to book before, but the book actually kind of digs into sort of the politics of surrounding Appalachia and sort of gives some sort of reasoning behind why Appalachia supports Trump and has sort of a Trumpist nationalist lean to it because of sort of the macro politics involved. It was interesting, like the controversy that's kind of surrounded it, and it was actually met to like immense critical backlash. Like the critics hated this movie. So let me ask you guys, what did you think? What were your thoughts? Just general thoughts. Did you like it? Not like it.
I personally loved the movie. I know that's a strong word, because everyone's like, "Oh, I liked it," but Travis said that it hit home. It hit very home, like eerily home for me, and it's really weird because you suggested we take a look at it and sit down over it, and as I'd mentioned in a conversation previous before we got on, the last 10 years of my life have been crammed into Disney films and stuff because I've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's almost all just 24/7, just Disney stuff running through my house. So I had not been aware of the film, much less even the book. And so I sit down without any context to watch this movie. And it was so eerie because that was my childhood.
Mm.
It shook me. I had to pause the movie a few times, to be honest, because I was crying because it was some of the things I literally went through some of those things.
Wow.
And so to me, that's not politics. That was my story even.
What's funny is all of this, the media, what you just shared, all those opinions existed, and I'm glad I hadn't read or come across it. Mm-hmm. When I watched the movie, I absolutely saw and felt no political agenda at all. I was watching this story of heartache and triumph and the pull and tear between should I stay, should I go type thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
Didn't see anything.
So let me ask you this. What did you guys like about it? Like, what are your favorite parts? For me, I think talking about Glenn Close, she just gave a masterclass acting performance, and all three of you are actors, so you guys can appreciate it even more. But like, she was that character in like this epically awesome, crazy way, right? I absolutely loved her character. I thought she just did such a great job. I love the fact that she was they called her Mama because that's very Eastern Kentucky. It's not Mama, right? Like Mama is like very like a country thing. Like those little details, I think are pretty awesome. And she's just she has just like the best lines like ever, you know. So I think at some point she says you're as dumb as a bag of hair, right? Great thing to say, right? She always talks about like shooting people. If you got a problem with that, you can talk to Bear with my gun. Like in the book, she even goes even further. A lot of times, she just tells people straight up, if you do this again, I'm going to shoot you in the face, right? Like just like, and my grandma wasn't like that. Like I had a my mama wasn't like that. But I know so many people have mamas like that. Like it just resonated with me, and just like her acting performance alone, her and Amy Adams, I just thought were just like they just got lost in the character, which I thought just so good about that.
I was going to say my first thought, like Houston, was I thought Glenn Close was unrecognizable as Glenn Close. It was we're halfway through the movie, and I'm like, now who is that? Because her character was so right there.
Yeah,
I mean, spot on. I was really impressed with that. And like you said, some of her lines, where it's like the wisdom of Appalachia. It was really cool, right? But there's a lot of deep stuff going on with the things she says. And more than that, the things she does. Like, I've recently been thinking, like love is not an emotion, it's an action. Sure. Okay. So thinking of it that way, she goes to the door and the guy's there with Meals on Wheels. Right. And okay, so what is her action there? Her action is to say, well, you got anything else? And then she takes him the small stuff she has and she gives him the larger portion.
Yeah.
He hears and sees this. That makes the difference in his life. Mm-hmm. Right there, everything like, whoop, hinge pin, all turned right there, right? Love and action right there. And I thought that was really cool that it's not something, because she didn't tell him all through the movie. That's one thing that got me is nobody's saying, I love you so much all the time, right? I'm doing these terrible things to you, but I love you, because their actions aren't saying that.
Yeah.
And finally, it's like this thing happens. And of course, Amy Adams did say, I love you at one point. It was like, okay, well, that's really cool. Great. She finally said it. But the grandmother's actions were like, or Mema's actions were, bam, this is love right here in action. This is what I'm seeing. What she's saying sounds harsh sometimes, but what I'm seeing is her loving this kid to the point that it completely changes his life.
It's great. It's great. Mattlock, what'd you love?
I'd like to piggyback on what Rory was saying, even to the point where Mama, she didn't even buy her meds. She bought the calculator instead,
Right.
Just like I was saying earlier, so much of that hit home. It was while I was watching that, I was just reliving my life. Like it made me think about all the things in my life that was going on like that. And I had a grandma. I mean, I called her grandma. That was like that. Now, she wasn't she was on my dad's side, but she was very, very much like that. Now, it wasn't ever a gun, but boy, she'd pull a switch out of thin air.
Yeah, sure.
And man, switch, she was deadly. She was deadly with them switches. But and that's how she was. She would make, she'd give Jesus a run for the money on the whole fishes and loaves things. To make things, to make provision,
Sure.
Stretch it out.
And that was, and so I that was born and raised in Oklahoma, so it was like that same feel stretched across, and the South don't like to claim Oklahoma and the Midwest don't like to claim Oklahoma. So we're kind of out there in limbo, but we kind of have both. We have both, we grew up that same, I grew up that same way, and the nostalgia of the 90s in there. And, Amy Adams, my mom, it was weird. It was like I was looking at my mom, with the big hair and the bangs and the denim shorts that were acid washed and the big baggy shirt and the going to the card and comic shop and the everything. Like
the production design and the costume design were spot on. Like spot on with those films.
Yeah.
And I have, being a filmmaker, being a writer, being a director, being an actor and producer, if I get lost in the film, it's a good movie.
Sure.
If something happens to where it pulls me out of being lost in the film, then I become the analyst.
Yep.
And I pick it apart.
100%.
But if I get lost in the movie, those are my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And I totally 100% got lost.
Yeah. Well, look, we take our own prejudices into anything we watch, right?
Sure.
And I think that's one thing you're saying there is that we have to be careful of is to carry too much of that in, that everything we see is through this jaded lens or whatever particular lens is. And we think that it's messed up because it didn't fit what we thought it should be, even though that's really what it was, if that makes sense.
I love when I say love, like some of the best scenes that stood out to me were basically anything with Mamaw, but really the scene with I think for me was the most powerful was where it got to the point where we watched this. I was watching with my wife, and my wife couldn't watch it anymore. She was like, I can't do it. But it was the after the mom yells at the kid and it takes him to the comic shop and the car shop and all that stuff, and they're driving home, and that car ride home and just how fast everything changes. And and she's like speeding and she is hitting him, and he runs out. Like at that point, Courtney, my wife, was like, I can't watch this anymore. It was like, wait, it was that emotional and crazy. But I thought like that was just such a well acted scene by the kid, by Amy Adams, captured so well in that film. And it just really, at that point, you're like, wow, this is not a normal way to grow up. Like you just see how terrible this situation was. I thought it was just a really good thing. And then what I loved about it too, just from a directorial standpoint, was how they set up the scene where she was reaching back with her hand, when she was struggling early in the film, and then they called back to that exact same thing later, when and they really built that tension of, is he going to go for the interview? Is he not going to go to the interview? And that visual cue, that visual callback. I know, Travis, we were talking about that earlier. Like that was just like so well done. Because that's something that isn't in the book, right? Like that's something that isn't in the book. And what's not in the book is so the flashback narrative structure that goes from Yale when present day back to the past. Like that was all constructed by the screenwriter and Ron Howard, which I thought was really good. And I thought ultimately one thing that Ron Howard did was he just captured. He didn't make people seem like caricatures of Appalachian people. I thought he really captured it, which I think is interesting because Ron Howard started his career in Mayberry. And this is like weird, bizarro Mayberry, right? Later in his life, where it's small town, but it's like small town with, devastated economics and an opioid crisis. Like it's such a weird bookend of his career, I think. So Travis, what did you love?
I think he nailed it. It wasn't a caricature type, and it wasn't hyperbole. It wasn't making fun. That stuff was so real, and it's so. My friends, I had friends growing up that were like that. I remember I said when I told my dad, and can we be real? We all love each other. When I moved back from the Bay Area in Berkeley, California, to Ohio, and I was like, Dad, I don't want to go back to Ohio. I said, it's poor. And I said, the white people, they're barefoot and they have like dirty faces and their kids have snotty noses. So, all right, this is what I remember. So just be real.
Yeah.
All right. So I get back to Ohio. We get back late at night and I wake up. There's a knock on the door. This guy named Harold, his brother, sister. And open the door, like, hey, can you guys come out and play? We knew you're moving into town. And sure enough, snot, there was dirt, and I looked down. I see the blackened feet from the dirt. And I was like, yeah, we can come out and play. Shut the door, said, Dad, look outside. But anyway, right. Wow. But my family was no better. We're a family of dysfunction. What I loved about this was the struggles the mental struggle that would occur. That was one, as being a smart kid. I would get straight A's, but I would go home and I wouldn't tell anybody. Kind of like you, Mattlock. I would go home that I was going home to lights being cut off all the time. Dad on crack. Sometimes my dad told me our TV and VCRs back in the 80s was like a big thing. We finally got one. Oh, it got stolen. But really, they stole it from themselves and sold it to the crack guys, and then to get crack. But then like a week later, the VCR came back. And they would tell us, "Oh, we found it." It's going right over my head. We found our VCR. It was intact. Okay, I didn't question it. And then when when my wife was watching with me, and she's crying for me because she's like, everything from my family falls on me. I've got a brother in jail right now. He's constantly in prison or in jail. When things happen, when my dad died, hey, Travis, what are we gonna do? So I make phone calls, and I knew an owner of a funeral home, so we could get it paid for. He ended up hooking me up and giving me $2,000 off, not pay the balance. There was just so much pressure. So I was watching it in a time of my life with some things that are going on personally, where I've just said I give up on life and helping. It's just too much weight. So I'm watching this young man grow up, go through this weight. And I was relating to him. I was lost in the story. So, and I hated that I could relate to this stuff so much. So that's why I thought it was like a really good movie. I could really feel and understand and put myself, and I think anyone could with we've all had decisions to make. So you don't have to be a hillbilly. You don't have to be a black dude from the hood to understand those struggles. Enablement, enabling your family.
Sure.
Or do you love your family? When the grandmother told the boy after that cops got called when he ran away from his mom, or when he had to that was the first thing that happened, that the grandfather said, "You did a good thing, son." He took up. We do have that interesting dynamic that exists when you hate your mom or someone in your family so bad, but you love them and you know that there's that loyalty.
So interesting.
Isn't that like, it was like really cool how that happened. I just loved it. I'm like, whoa, you could see that. They showed it. He pulled it off in an amazing way. And then when he had the pee test, he's like, "I'm not going to pee in the cup for my mom. She needs to learn her lesson."
Right.
Even though he did that, the family he still started making excuses and always had to be her savior for a while until he finally like stood up for himself in that moment when they're grabbing at the end. That, to me, that's standing up for yourself, and that betters the family when you make decisions to leave and do that's ultimately right. You're going to just kill yourself trying to make up for a dysfunctional family.
It's interesting.
But it was really cool to weigh that out and say, God.
See, I think that's interesting what you bring up, Trav, is that, and this is something actually the book brings up, is that, the issues in Appalachia are shockingly similar to the issues in the inner city. And because ultimately, I think one of the biggest themes that in this film is this realistic portrayal of poverty. And it just shows what poverty is and does. And even things like the pee test scene, when he has to go in and, he goes to the bathroom, but he has to like pull the curtain, and that's like the door to the bathroom and stuff like that. Like, there's those little aspects to where if you grew up poor, then you're like, wow, that's real. I think a lot of why this film didn't land with a lot of people on the coasts, especially in Hollywood, is that I don't think they can imagine people growing up like that. Yeah. It's so far removed from like their world. Like, what do you mean that you don't have a bathroom door? You have to pull a curtain across, right?
Like, that's a great point. It's like I guess in another setting, my mind might go to the place that there's in what you're saying. Wow, they created this world, so it ticks me off because they created this world for what it is, and it should have been this. When it's like, no, this is what the world was. I hadn't thought about that playing into the anger or the outrage aspect over the film, but that's a great point, man.
And it's so funny.
This is not real,
right?
People can accept. They can accept Middle Earth. Oh,
right. Yeah.
Come on. You can accept The Hobbit, but you can't. No, guys. This is going on.
it's not political.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's really, I think, a fascinating look at like just how evil poverty is, man. Like not I'm not saying that poor people are evil. I'm saying poverty is just like such a terrible thing. Like, and again, going back to Glenn Close is, and I hope she wins the Oscar, just like as a middle finger to all the Razzie people, right?
Let her go ahead and win the Razzie and the Oscar.
And the Oscar.
That would be
I love
awesome.
it, right? But like, but Roy, you brought up that scene with the Meals on Wheels, right? Is when she was figuring out how to eat, like that one shows the selflessness of her, but that's an evil situation. Like nobody should have to deal with that, right? And just like how insurmountable something like just buying a calculator is, right? And like I never grew up super poor. I was sort of lower middle class, right? And I actually think I didn't know we were probably poorer than I thought. My parents did a really good job of figuring out how to maximize, so we all really didn't know. Sort of like Mamaw did. But my dad worked 40 years on the railroad. My mom didn't work. We had 3 kids, and there were times that were tough. But like it got to where we so many times just ran out of money and just don't have money, and you had to make those decisions. And but I thought that the portrayal of poverty was very accurate. But that's something, Trav, that crosses over into the inner city, and is that poverty doesn't discriminate against what it affects, and it's just outside of even the drug abuse and all and all that those other things. Just like I thought this was a really interesting portrayal of poverty in general.
I had one friend, one of my white friends, when I moved back to Ohio, and Ohio has rich, middle class, poor white people. You guys have to understand when I made that comment. I was an 11-year-old kid, and coming from Berkeley, even though I lived in bad areas in Ohio, I went in California. I went to good schools. So I would see from Africans to Venezuelans to, just good melting pot, really cool dynamic. So I had a narrow mind in terms of what Ohio is, black and white for the most part of it to me. But I had a friend whose parents would do crack. They were white. They would do crack with my dad, my uncles, and everything. And they're real poor and every. And one night I remember my friend, she said, "Oh my gosh, we got to go to this house where my dad is at. My dad just shot himself in the head." And he put a 22 to his head and shot himself in the head. And my uncle was recounting the story to me. He just went like this. "Oh, what did I do?" And there's a bullet lodged in his head. The guy lives through it. That's hillbilly. That's hillbilly strong. Hillbilly strong.
That is what?
There are some good points to being hillbilly strong.
Frontal lobe right
that's
there,
it. That's when it pays off to be hard-headed, right? Like that's
oh my god.
It.
But those are the things I saw and live with, and I took P tests for my brother because we looked alike. So I was relating to this Mattlock just like you were. I remember going into Quest Recovery Services when I was like 15. So my brother he was going to go to prison to jail. I'm 15, 16. So I take the P test for him because I'm that kid out of our family. No drugs, trying to do the best I can, going to school, get good grades, and but always making up, always taking up, always enabling. Sure. I've been an enabler probably my whole life. I have to admit that about myself. And when I do take time to shut people off and shut down everyone pulling on me and to concentrate and raise my kids, then I live with this sometimes an insurmountable sense of guilt. And I don't know if you guys have ever had that with any the dynamics of your family, what you go through when you like kind of push someone aside just to get your life right. And so it was a struggle watching that. And I think the one place I cry at Mattlock and Rory and Houston was a weird part It was when he got that A on his test and she took that paper away and walked away and she was looking at it. I don't know, that's the part that really touched my soul the most out of everything, because she was like weird and odd, but she was a warrior, the grandmother. She had to take responsibility. No one else is going to do it. I'm going to do it. We're going to get someone right, something right. There's something special in this kid. And we haven't talked about the whole situation with, he had to get those smarts from somewhere. So his mom, though she's on these opioids, she was a nurse. It's so hard. I know nurses, and that's one of the hardest tests to take. It's, you got to study just like you're a surgeon. She had that ability, but somewhere down the line, no one found her and got her the calculator, I think.
Right.
And gave her the bigger part of the chicken of the food. To say, I'm going to do it. It's in all of us to be great. And I know maybe I'm jumping the gun and I'm getting to these deeper themes that I saw, but I thought that was really interesting.
One of the things that I thought, one of the most powerful scenes in that movie was when they were in the car, and I think it was when the grandfather died and everybody stopped for the funeral procession.
Yeah, that was
and Mama and the kid says, "What are they doing?" And Mama says, "We respect our dead." Right. And that was a line that I think most people wouldn't pick up on, but like that, I think more than any other line, captures Appalachia, captures that you're like, we're hill people, like, and there was like a pride that goes along with that, and it's just an interesting dynamic. So there's a lot of negatives about it: lack of diversity, cut off from the world, a lot of lack of opportunity, poverty, etc. But there's also this interesting like unity that comes along with it. Like, these are our people, and we're gonna. I
used to love when I don't know if you guys experienced this, Rory or Matlock. I loved the days and times when a neighbor was allowed to spank your kid, like, because everyone kept you in line. That's Marsha's boy. That's Papa Carter's boy. That's what they would say where I grew up. Boy, if you don't get out of there, and your grandma said I got permission to give you a butt whooping, right? So you had to be on your P's and Q's no matter where you went. Now you're afraid to say anything to anybody. Just not just a whooping, but just even saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. Someone comes to, what did you say to my son? I'm taking you to court. You've hurt them. Now they have anxiety and depression. Not making fun of those things. Those are real things that like my family has dealt with. But and see how I have to preface that, because I know that this will go out to the public. Everything I say, I'm afraid of now. But I loved how when they beat up the guy, the little boy was getting beat up, and the uncles and comes over, says, "Oh, I know that's Jethro's boy," and he punches him in the stomach, and he knew, like, you know what, you'll probably go and they'll probably say, you shouldn't have been beating up on that kid. Then serves you rights. There's not going to be a big family argument.
I want to talk quickly about I think the most prevalent theme in this movie is dealing with addiction, and specifically dealing with addiction of a family member, and the whole thing is built around this tension of, should he help his mom or shouldn't he help his mom? Should he leave and go do his thing, or should he stay? Right? What do you like? Were you all rooting for this guy just to ditch the mom? Were you rooting for him to stick with the mom? Like were you torn?
Why don't you go first, Matlock? We haven't heard from you. What was your thoughts on that?
Discomfort.
What's hard about that is when you're watching the movie from the outside, it's just a choice. Oh, don't do that. Oh, do that.
Sure.
Go to the interview. It betters your life. Oh, stay with your mom because she needs you. What's difficult about that is the gravity that kid lived under his entire life, of someone else's choices.
Sure.
And the fact that his entire life was decided for him because of someone else, up to the point, like, I can't do that because, I don't know the state mom's in, or I can't this, or I can't that because, of whatever, he went and got a job, just to help mama make ends meet because
Sure.
mom was doing what mom did, and mom's choices and clearly the dad's choices, because he was just not even in the picture like that.
Sure.
They never even went into it. Like clearly just left.
Yep.
He had to live. He had to live in the wake of that, and the decision, because so many people have grown up in that type of state before, and the fact that the two of us sitting here right now can draw parallels to this movie, there means there's countless others that
Sure.
can.
Yep.
And the fact that, whereas, Houston, you're saying, you feel the theme is definitely addiction, and I'm not going to disagree with that. But for me, the theme was, this kid could have gone the exact same path as mom did.
Sure.
But chose a different one.
Yeah.
Whereas mom chose to settle for the hand that was dealt her. This kid chose, no, I'm not playing that game.
Right.
I'm going to play a different one. He decided that his life was going to be something different.
Yeah.
Whereas that's what mama was hinting at, and was
Sure.
like, hey, you need to make something of yourself, because someone else is going to do it for you. Mom was waiting on someone to do it for her. That's why she went from man to man. That's why she went from drug to drug. That's why it was never her fault.
Sure.
No matter what was going on, it was someone else's fault. The car ride, it was the son's fault. He was just being a kid, and or he shouldn't have said what he said, or and I had to work long shifts, so I had to start taking drugs to whatever. They fired me, and it was their choice. Like it was always someone else's fault.
No accountability. Yeah, no accountability.
None whatsoever. But not even like, at some point you have to hold yourself accountable. If someone else is not there for you, you have to be there for yourself.
Sure.
At some point, at the end of the day, excuses are just BS. They just are. And you have to stand up on your own two legs. You have two legs to stand up on. And if you choose not to stand up on them, that is your choice. But you cannot be bitter at other people. Cannot. Yeah. And to me, though addiction, we see it, and addiction and poverty generally hold hands. They just do. Whether it's drugs,
you're right.
Whether it's drugs or it's alcohol, abuse, geez, man, the list is long, but they all hold hands, And then you look on the other end of things, and you hear the stories of people that come out of it, and they said, I had to make a choice.
Sure.
Do you ever lose that choice? I mean, I'm really curious if you ever lose that choice, because it gets to such a point that
well, okay, I'll say this. I think you can cross the line to a point to where you've done yourself enough damage. If you've damaged yourself to a point, at some point, Jesus would be the only hope.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to try that route, that's fine. It is a very uphill battle, up mountain battle.
Yeah. But at what point do you think? At what point do you, or do you ever say, I have to give up? I mean, I think that like the movie really sits on that tension of like how far are you supposed to go with somebody in that situation, right? Because Travis, you mentioned it. Like you're that guy in your family. You're this kid in your family, right?
Yeah.
That when people are addicted, people are doing drugs, people get in trouble, people get put in jail, like you're the fixer, right?
Yeah.
And and it seems like when you fix it, and then they fall back, and they go, and then you have to fix it again, and then you have to fix it again, and then you have to fix it again, then you have to fix it again, right? Like, and it, to like one of the worst scenes, the most infuriating scenes I think in the movie is when he works so hard to get his mom to the rehab facility, and when he's like, when he's doing the credit card game, and I think we all know how that we could all like we've all experienced that, of like put $700 in here, put $200 on this one, like that whole game, like he did all that, and then she just leaves, and you're just like, dude, like, come on, like, you know, like it's infuriating.
Yep.
But it's his mom. So what do you do? I mean, like, how far are you supposed to go, Trav, before you just you wipe your hands of it, or do you ever?
I'm a recovering enabler. Hi, Travis. I am. I'll show you this up here. Those kids up there, 7 kids, and those people running is us running from poverty to gain to wealth, is running from spiritual defeat to glory and to knowing God. And that's why you see that legacy changer thing up there. I created my own family brand, and I asked my kids, who wants to help change the family name with me? Who's on this ride? So I did it in a brand way so that it didn't seem like so altruistic. I said, okay, we have this brand. We're the Carters. We're synonymous with poverty, lack, drugs, alcohol, prison. Our name is horrible in our town. Let's change it. But then I'm trying to change the family, the kids, but I have this wife from Sweden who's never seen anything like this, and I put her into this world. And at some point, though I'm trying to change and make this, if you're not along for the ride with me, you're going to end up holding me back. You mentioned Christ Jesus, Mattlock. A pastor told me, he said, I don't care how strong you are. He says, you can be stronger than a person. You can weigh more than a person. Like you could be 200 pounds and they could be 135. But if you stand up on top of a chair and they're standing below you and you try to pull them up, they can yank you down a lot faster. You have to use all your force. They just yank you down a little bit. So if you're going to be on a chair and pull someone up, you better make sure that you're super strong. In this movie, let this guy go to Yale, let him get this internship and become super strong before helping the others out, because he's trying to do it when he's not strong enough to pull up from the chair. And you have to know when that moment is. You know, it's funny because you talk about the Bible and Jesus would say stuff like, hey, why don't you come follow me? But Jesus, I have to go bury my father. He just died. And he'd be like, well, let the dead bury the dead. I got something bigger. And what I'm going to do, you'll see that guy in heaven. You'll be with your dad forever when it comes time.
That sounds harsh.
Sounds harsh.
Too, right?
It sounds really harsh.
That's a hard word.
I needed those things so I wouldn't be that enabler that the gentleman in the movie almost was. Because at some point, if I'm called to be a type of a savior for the family, but I can never get equipped and I can never get my lifesaver and I can never get trained like the Jedi, then I'll never be the Jedi to be able to battle all of these different things, if you will. Sure. And you know that point, but your heart tells you, I got to turn around. I can't leave them. And what if it doesn't work? And what if something bad happens to them? And it's like what Mattlock said. Sometimes they're just so far gone.
Yeah.
So far gone that you will mess up your entire life and future. And a lot of people who were attached to what you were supposed to do, your calling, your gifting in life. There's a ton of moms that you have to save, but you'll never get to save those crackhead moms or whatever. So it's a tough thing. And we become enablers for family because of the guilt.
So are you saying that there is a point you get to that you just have to wash your hands of it? Is there ever that point?
You have to become literally calloused and not you become soft on people. You love the people, tough on the issues. My executive coach said, you're too soft. You're soft on people and soft on the issues. Be tough on the issue. You are doing this. This is what's going to happen if you continue to do this. And a parent, a friend, a family member who's in that position has to be the prodigal son's father. He did let him, knowing that his son was going to see poverty and lack and make the bad choice.
Let him go.
You got to everyone do their prodigal journey and fall and come back. And it's hard to do it, guys. It's hard.
So,
It's tough.
so a question that really came up for me that ties into this that I don't completely understand. Okay, for you guys, it looked like that. For me, I was like, how many times are you going to forgive this person? Seriously? Move on. Seriously. And I thought, okay, how many times? Well, Jesus said not 7 times, but 70 times 7. The meaning being you never stop forgiving the person, right? But I don't understand how that plays out. And that's kind of what you guys are touching on right now. Maybe Mattlock and Travis can speak to this better than Houston or I, because of what you guys are saying, the way you connected with the movie in ways that I did not. But that's where it fell for me. Like, where does forgiveness fall in all this? And what does it look like really and practically?
Soft on people, tough on the issues. Rory, I have a coach named Rory. He's my executive coach. He's a pastor, and I'm going to quote what he said. Yeah, he is awesome. And you need a Rory in your life, what you just said. Okay. And he said, let me tell you what, Travis, what you are, what you're describing to me. And these are just his words, guys. He said, you sponsor a lot of bullshit. That's what you do. You sponsor it. And he said exactly what you said, Rory. He's like, at some point, you're forgiving them, but you can't keep being around those issues. They're dragging you down.
Yeah, so I think that's the distinction. Is it possible to forgive somebody, love somebody, but still not necessarily have to be dealing in the mess all the time, right? Like, where's that line that you make that distinction, right? What do you think, Mattlock? Where is that line?
Well, I'll say this. We'll bring the movie back in real quick, and then I'll talk about just life. I think his name is JD, right? In the film?
Yeah, JD. Yep.
Yeah, I think JD he had done that. He had cut the tie, and then what brought him back was the fact that mom like this could have been the end all for mom.
Sure.
So I think he had cut that tie. Now he came back to be the support in that extreme dire situation. And I think that tie was still cut, but he was trying to do the best he could in the moment. And I think that even when you cut the tie, there's still going to be those moments where you still come back in to try and help or try and intervene in some degree.
I agree.
Just because of love, because of that. But knowing that you've cut the tie, and the fact of the forgiveness part, that comes a lot easier than cutting the tie. You've forgiven someone whenever you can think back on a situation and it doesn't hurt your heart as much anymore. That's that the forgiveness has happened in that degree. But cutting that tie, I've had to do that multiple times in my life. And sometimes you realize that maybe it wasn't quite as severed as you thought it was. But saying that, cutting the tie, it's not like you erase the person and they're done. Like, you've chosen that over your family, because at the end of the day, for JD it was mom. For this person down the road, it's this person. And cutting the tie doesn't mean removing them from your life completely. Now that may mean a couple of years go by where you don't. You got it. Just like Travis was saying, you've got to be so strong. You're not just standing on a wicker chair. You're not just standing on a chair barely above these people. You need to be so secure in your life that whenever they start tugging on you, you're not going to topple over and fall back down.
Right.
It's not going to remove you from your position or from your platform that you've set up in your life. And that's what's hard is sometimes you do have to make those choices. Travis, he's got kids. I've got kids. Whenever it comes to family and things like that, you do have a bit of there's more there. There's more there than just how it affects you, and you have to decide how it affects the entire world in your world. So cutting those ties means a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but knowing that it's family, especially like it with JD, I think he did cut those ties because he moved on and he went to college,
Yeah, he went to Marines, right? He went to the Marines first,
he
went to college, right? Yeah, that was probably, I think, strategically such a great move for him, just to
talk about
remove
becoming
himself from that.
strong.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like that's such an interesting thing. I think you have, your parallel to the parable of the prodigal son is that dad did let him go, right? And sometimes, he didn't chase him down, didn't try to talk him into staying, didn't try to do any of that stuff. It's interesting because the Bible says that, Jesus said that the spirit's willing but the flesh is weak. Like there, what we see with all of, I think, the people there in that in that movie, it's just like that whole area is that it's what's interesting about that area is that generally it's a very church. Everybody grows up with a belief in God. I mean, it's the Bible Belt, right? It's like no one really questions it. Not a lot of people are churched. Not a lot of people sort of walk it out. It's just like if you ask somebody, "Are you a Christian?" Of course. Do you believe in God, Jesus? Yeah, of course, right? But are you active in your local church and are you discipled or whatever? Like that. That's when it
kind of like,
goes,
are you American?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of very similar.
Yeah,
and
of course. I'm American. I'm Christian. Yeah.
So in the book, he recounts how his mama like always professed to be a Christian, but then she would go when the grandfather would come home drunk, passed out on the couch. She one night she lit him on fire.
That was awesome. I mean, that was hilarious.
Yeah,
right? She's lighting him on fire, and there's no that doesn't rub like how that's just kind of what you do. So there's interesting disconnect. But what the book doesn't, or what the movie doesn't go into, is in the book there's a time when he does go back and live with his real dad, and while he's with his real dad, his real dad actually starts taking him to church. And he starts learning about forgiveness, and he starts learning about just the gospel and things like that. And then when he goes back then to live with his mom and his mama, like he has this different sense of obligation of with his family. It's really interesting. But one thing, the most interesting things I see, as far as like what are the lessons that we can learn. So many people feel bound to their family because it's your family, right? And they say, well, I can't move because of this. I can't do this. I got to take care of my sister or whatever. When before God gave his grand plan to Abraham, the first thing he told him, he says, leave the country of where you're from. You got to get out of your family. Like leave your family. Like you got to get out of that environment, right? Just so you can hear and understand and figure out kind of what I want you to do. And even Paul, when Paul's talking about just the administration of the church, like if somebody's doing screw it up, there you go to him, talk to him with somebody else, talk to him in front of a bunch of other people, right? But there is a point. There is a point that we gotta separate and remove, right? Rory,
so this is what's burning in me right now. And since you set it up that way, I don't feel like it's a stretch. What does love look like, right? Because we're talking all around this whole theme of, whoa, this is kind of what he did to make the situation right, and what she went through and the grandmother did. We were watching love take place, right? And so I wrote this down yesterday. It's Jesus, when he talks about love, he talks about a biblical kind of love. In the Greek, it's called agape, right? Mm-hmm. And so we go, what does that mean? Godly love, agape. Well, it's basically an action. Agapao is the verb. And so anytime he's talking about what Jesus did or what God did, he uses the verb form. So I wrote down yesterday, agape love is not an emotion, it's an action. It's not a feeling, it's a doing. Sure. And I think that what's so hard for us to grasp is, what is love supposed to look like, right? Because it looked like, let's go to the Garden of Eden. It looked like God creating this perfect environment and creating man and woman and putting them in this environment. And oh man, it's everything they could ever dream of. And he visits them all the time. And that's love. Love also looked like him allowing them to eat of the tree of good, of the knowledge of good and evil, and to fall from grace and to die, right? And then it's like he lets them go, man. And he like sort of distances himself because there's this separation, right? Well, what also does love look like? Love, jumping through the whole story of Abraham and all this sort of stuff, just jumping forward to Jesus, love also looked like at the right time. And you were talking about it before, Mattlock, I believe it was you saying just a minute ago, Jesus jumped into the situation. Maybe it was Travis or whoever, so that he could be there and know what it is, right? He had to become man, God's own son.
Yeah, sure.
God came to earth to be man, to live it out so he could know what it is.
What's
and
interesting
at the right
about that
moment.
What's interesting about that Garden of Eden situation is Adam and Eve screwed up, right? They misstepped. They were deceived, and they broke the one rule that God had, right? That enacted these consequences. But the first thing that God did after that, right? If you look at his first action after they fell, is he made them clothes.
Yeah, clothes.
Right. Which I thought, like, he didn't whoop him. He didn't give him a whooping. He didn't get the switch off the tree and like go to town. Like, he's still like, even though they screwed up, and you know what? They didn't take the personal responsibility. Like he was like, hey, what did y'all do? And Adam was like, hey, it's the woman you gave me. She's the one that did it. He blamed his wife, and then Adam, and then Eve was like, "Hey, it was the serpent's fault. It wasn't my fault." Right? So everybody's like, goes back to what you're talking about, Mattlock, is there was no personal responsibility, no personal accountability, right? And then even despite that, God said, "Okay, I'm still going to make you close." Right? I'm still going to provide for you, and that's what grace is. Which so it wasn't like he's like, "All right, you guys screwed up. I'm out." So it seems like God was kind of doing what JD was doing in this situation, right? But at the same time, there were still consequences that came along with the fall. I mean, there were still that still had to kind of play out, right? He didn't.
What's interesting? Check this out, and this goes along with what you said, Mattlock, and what you're saying right now, Houston. One, it's really cool that we could take these movies that people thought were political and find cool things to line up with what would the Word of God have to say about it? How does that handle? How does that play out? I think that's really cool that we can find this in this movie. But when we're talking about Jesus and sacrifice, and Mattlock said earlier, you don't give up on your family. There's certain times you break away, you forgive, and he went back. Okay, I got the call. This is a moment I have to go back, and I believe in that. I don't believe that that's like enablement. It would have been an enablement if he would have missed his interview.
Sure,
but he was the one, the chosen one, if you will, the Jesus character that had to do it because his sister put a lot of pressure on him. Why couldn't you just take her in? And why she's like, you take come back, and then he's like, you live with. I can't have her live with me, and it's, she just kind of bailed on him, and it's kind of like when Moses was the one who had to go to Pharaoh. Like, anyone could have said, Pharaoh, let my people go, but Moses, what's going on? Can you go talk to him again? Like, and I'm sure he's like, oh my gosh, it's on me, it's on me. But you are actually the one in that moment. You are the one. You're the one who had to go and get strength, and no one would have been able to do it. He was called since a little boy to do that act.
Yeah,
sure.
Him getting the good grades, him going to the army. He was the one, and she ultimately got sober.
Yeah.
But that's where knowing you're the one, but knowing how to be the one. I know that sounds weird, and Morpheus. Like, I'm sorry.
That's it.
But what's interesting, I think it's an interesting thing to consider the sister, and we haven't talked about the sister. Like, the sister was there, like in the town, right? But at the same time, but that's the same, which is frustrating. It's like, dude, come on, can't you take her? But at the same time, like, the sister had kids of her own. And she had a husband, and I feel like that family dynamic starts to change a little bit when now you're trying to protect your own kids from and that creates sort of a different calculation because you bring the addict in the house with your own kids, like that could get squirrely real fast. What do you think, Trav? I mean, I think that's your exact situation because you talk about bringing Marika into it, but then you have like with your kids, and with your brother and all that stuff. Like, how do you shield them from from all that?
Well,
or if you're just the one, do you just like
they get
not worry
mad
about
at
it?
me. My wife will want me to. She's like, okay, but she hates that I'm the one in the family. I'm the one who does. I go to church. I get executive coaching. I have the big corporate job. I have really strong, morally sound friends who will live in Christian friends, right? So it all culminates to me being within my family. I am that person. Now I do have to watch that I don't endanger my children. I don't neglect my children and my wife, and I don't stress them out, because my wife gets mad when I'm in situations like JD, because it doesn't phase me. Like Courtney started crying when the boy was getting hit by his mom. I was like, oh, that's nothing. He shouldn't have ran. He should have just took that one. You're gonna get it worse if once she catch you. Like,
Right?
wait, that made you cry, Courtney? But
She
that's
dragged him
not
down the
demeaning Courtney.
steps.
She just never saw anything like that. To me,
Sure.
that was like, all right, listen, that's typical. Oh, stop. You know, I'm just gonna toss them up and take it. So
Right, sure.
when I explain that stuff to my wife, and they see people in our family on drugs and going crazy, and the cops come at our house 3 times in a row, and we're in the suburbs with all these big houses and you know, affluent white people around, and then I'm like, we do feel embarrassed. I'm like, oh man, I'm the black dude. I bought the hood to the suburbs. I'm already messing up. You know, I got those pressures.
Sure.
But then these crazy situations where cops are being called, and my kids are like, what's going on? They've never seen that. And a part of me is like, oh man, I didn't. Could you invite that, and then all of a sudden that starts chipping. It can do one or two things. It can make them stronger, or it could be like, okay, this is normal life. This is cool. With the cops in your life, drugs in your life, it happens in our family, and it's a weird situation, because you can, like, I had my first beer, because not that drinking a beer is a bad thing, but I had my first beer, but you know what my rationale was? Well, you know, my dad's cool. He drinks beer. And I waited till I was 18. I was like, I'm 18 now. Let me have a beer.
You waited till you're 18 to drink a beer? That's awesome.
Yeah, because I thought it was. I thought it was really. I thought it was really gross. I mean,
beer's terrible. Yeah,
and my dad was like a more of a beer connoisseur, which like now I will go to like these tasting things, and I'll taste like different beers or whatever. Like I'll taste it. You know, I was like, what was he into? He was like, oh, this one is so crisp and this blah blah. But anyway, that was my rationale, is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
And when I would see things happen in my life, I'm like, all right, well, the cops are coming over, but it's not as much as it was when I was little. So this is cool. I don't want my kids to start doing that. So I do want to shield them a little bit.
It's interesting.
It's weird. I want them to go through some things, but I want to shield them from normalizing. This is not normal, guys.
And Mattlock, you got 3 little girls, right? So like, how in a vacuum without your daughters, you know, you have a calculation of how you can help a family member like that. But when you bring your daughters in the mix, like, how do you balance that, right? Like, who takes priority?
Yeah. See, well, my kids will always take priority in that scenario, and I'm not ashamed of that, and I don't feel 1 ounce of guilt that my kids, because my kids will not endure the childhood that I did.
Right.
Won't. Not even a flavor of it. Not a spice. And you know, they say, you know, you are who you are because of what you know, and it's like, okay, sure, but you know what? I have a strong inkling and feeling that, you know, you can learn some life lessons without getting abused.
Yes.
You know, and you can learn life lessons, you know, and that's one thing is, you know, and not throwing shade at anyone for drinking alcohol, but I've never tasted, because one of the many households I grew up in, the man that drank alcohol became a monster and beat us all because of alcohol.
Yep.
So I know that is what that does.
Interesting.
And if anyone is to do, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, oh, it's just casual, and I'm like, but at one point it won't be.
Right. That's interesting.
So that'll never happen, and that won't be in my household, and so my kids will never. And that's one thing is, you know, there's people that, you know, that'll and don't get me wrong, I spoil my kids, but there's people that like really spoil their kids, you know, and they're like, well, I just want them to have everything. Well, I want them to have everything that I didn't have as a kid. And I'm like, okay, I do want that for my kids, but I want them to not have everything that I had.
That's good.
And I want them to still know and understand that those monsters still live out there, and they may live next door, but that does not have to affect you in such a way that it cripples you, or makes it to where you're able to make a decision. And you know what? Sometimes the monsters are in our families.
Yeah.
And you have to make that decision that, I'm sorry, like I've literally had to tell a person, no, you will not see my children.
Wow.
And they made a big stink about it, but you know what? They haven't been there.
Sure.
So that one moment that they wanted to see my kids for whatever the purpose and reason was a fleeting moment that could have damaged my kids for forever.
Sure.
It was fleeting for them, but could have impacted my children for the rest of their life. So you know what? That fleeting moment that you got mad about didn't mess my kids up.
Sure.
I don't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad about it at all.
So in that light, like the sister, like may have actually made that right decision, like giving priority over.
I think she did her version of cutting ties as well.
Yeah,
I think she was there just the same for the brother, but the brother was able to be there in a completely different capacity.
A different way. Yeah, I agree. No, it's super interesting. So let's wrap this up. I'm going to go around and just get the big takeaways. Like, what's your takeaway? Just like when you walk away from this film, what are you going to hold on to, spiritually, emotionally, entertainment wise? Like, what's your big takeaway? We'll start with you, Rory. What do you think?
I think that it was a story that he wrote about his life, and it was what it is. First of all, it was what it was. Not a political statement, any of that stuff. It just was what it was. That's what Kentucky looks like, right?
Sure.
In that area. So first of all, that, and on the deeper side of things for me, I know I keep coming back to the love thing, but it trying to learn, what does love look like? Because I need to love properly, right? I need to love as Jesus Christ loved. And that's really hard, because what does it look like when I disagree with all these people, or they're doing terrible things, and I'm supposed to forgive them, but not necessarily check out of their lives all the time. I'm supposed to do something to help and not enable. And but they hate me. And what does loving that look like? I mean,
sure,
these are themes I'm struggling with, as you can tell, in my life, with a country that's so divided, and a people that are so divided, and people have active interest somehow to try and keep us divided and make it worse. And I'm like, we're called to cross that divide, just like in the movie, right? We're called to cross that divide with love. And this movie I thought was amazing because it looked like so many different things that were unexpected. And I'm hearing you guys' stories and stuff, when you talk about it, it's like, wow, this is a lot for me to learn and take in and try and gain wisdom. And like Mattlock said, you don't have to live it to have wisdom from life. You can gain wisdom from others who have lived it. And I try and gain so much wisdom from the Bible and Scripture. And hearing you guys talk about it and how it affects your lives is really great for me to learn what it's supposed to look like as well.
Yeah, it's good. Yep. That's good. T-Rev, what do you think? What's your big takeaway?
Probably three. First one, get out of your comfort zone when it comes to, you're going to meet someone in your life, not JD to mom, but mama to JD.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to take him in her household. Stay with your mom. Stay in that dysfunctional area until she saw it's on me.
Yeah.
There's something gifted in that kid right there. We've got a winner. We've got a savior. I've got to get him out though. We have to get out of our comfort zone and approach people, take people, and sponsor someone, if you will. All right. That changed his life. And two, there's going to be that calculator moment.
Mm-hmm.
When you make that sacrifice as a person, there's a time when we see, okay, I've got to get it there. Someone sacrificed for me. So Mama's sacrificing, and him seeing that, him watching the food, seeing what she did with the calculator, but her being tough in that situation, it awakened something where he was able to revisit his soapbox, as we call it in our story beats, and think about what does life really mean. That had to happen. And three, know that know that we're built just like made in the image of God. We are built to help be a conduit and help save someone. But there's also in that saving someone, you have to know when to when to be soft on the people, forgiving the people, but tough on their issues, and let them fall, hurt, and go through that prodigal moment theirself, so that you're not weighed down. He could have missed a moment. He could have missed that interview, but he did the right thing by going back to his mom. But he did the right thing by letting her be in that suffering. She's reaching his hand out. Mom, you've done some things to yourself. I'm going to go get myself right. I came back. I set you up. Now it's on you. You have to know those moments and be strong enough to fulfill them.
That's good. What's your big takeaway, Mattlock?
I think I think I'll piggyback kind of just off of what was said just now by Travis. You know, those rock bottom moments. You know, the mom, she hit that rock bottom, and I think that JD making his choice in her rock bottom moment was the truth that she needed. You know, because at the end of the film we find out that was her turnaround moment. You know, and that she was sober from then on out. You know, and I think that we have the choice. I think the biggest takeaway of the film for myself is ultimately we get to choose whether or not we allow the world around us to be the excuse or to be the fuel.
That's good.
And we get to choose, you know, and that may be, you know, to be the best parent you can be, to be the best lawyer you can be, to be the best in the film and entertainment industry, the music industry, you know, to be the whatever, you know, to be in Mama's case, she was doing the best she could do as Mama, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that is my biggest takeaway from this is just, you know, we have the power, and that's not even, I mean, that's whether you're Christian or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
You have the power to choose for yourself. You know, is it easy? No.
Right.
Especially in scenarios like the one we're discussing. You know, but for me, the biggest takeaway is definitely that we have the choice. You know, and regardless if whoever has seen this, watching this right now, has seen the movie or not, it is 1,000,000% worth a watch.
Yes,
I agree.
100%.
Such a good movie.
100%.
Ignore the critics.
That's it. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you know, my big takeaways. One is just, you know, it shows, this movie I think shows the divide that sort of urban America, between urban America and sort of, you know, Appalachia. Like it's there's a divide between people live in the city and sort of, you know, and people live in the country, and you know, there's this misunderstanding, and you know, we gotta recognize when other people are shaking the jar, right? And you know, it's on the macro sense, and but you know, sort of thematically, you know, those takeaways for me, you know, the things that stick with me is I love that speech that Mama gives him. I love the fact that she's like the character aspect of, she loved the Terminator movies, right? And she says that real poignant speech of like, listen, we going basically what you were saying, Mattlock, like we have, you have the choice. Are you going to be the good Terminator? Or are you going to be the bad Terminator? You know, are you going to protect or are you going to destroy? And
or the indifferent Terminator.
Right. We make that choice. And you know, I think, you know, she decided to be that good Terminator. Her mom, or his mom, was very much the bad Terminator. Listen, and I think in a way, even Mama was probably a bad Terminator to her own daughter, in a way, in a different way than she was the good Terminator to the grandson.
Yes, never too late to switch.
Right. And it's
never too late.
And and that's tough, right? Because I think that Amy Adams, the mom, she Bev, I think was her name. She dealt with a lot of stuff in the way she grew up that that she probably didn't deserve either, that she had to deal with, right? But what made her different than her own kid is that her JD chose differently, and so I think that's a poignant takeaway that you had, Mattlock. So we had that choice, and but we can decide, like you were saying, Trav, especially with kids, like there's these inflection points where we can speak into the life of kids, and you may not see like that moment that the light bulb clicks for him, but because Mamaw didn't see it either, she didn't see it happen. Like it happened in the background, and he just started doing the dishes, and he started paying attention in school, but it all goes back to that one moment where she decided to not get her prescription filled, just so she could get the calculator, and she sacrificed the food, and just a couple of those little things. That's when it made that difference. And we don't know the difference that we're making in other people's lives, especially the lives of children. Children are watching us like crazy, and whether they're your own kids or not, right? So that's a big takeaway. And for me, like, a lot of ways, we're talking about how do we relate to JD, in his situation, especially when the mom's reaching back with her hand, and you're like, do you grab the hand? Do you not grab the hand? Gosh, man, like, listen, I'm like you, Mattlock, like, well, not exactly. Like, I don't drink. It's not because I never tasted it. Like beer, every beer I taste tastes like pee. I just don't like beer. Like, not that I know what pee tastes like, but you understand what I'm saying. That
was my next question. That was my next question.
I can tell you.
I just
never found the beer I like. But I think we all sort of can relate to JD. Do we grab the hand? Do we don't? I'm not. I don't struggle with addiction. I've never struggled with addiction of in alcohol or drugs or anything like that. I've never even smoked a cigarette. I'm like, sort of one of those straight laced dudes. But like, we've all been the mom still. We've all struggled. We've all been in that situation. And whether it's with whatever it is, whatever your situation is, like, we've all been brought to like fetal position in the bed in some way, whether physically or emotionally or spiritually. And I'm just thankful that every time I reach my hand back, that God always takes it.
Yeah.
Like however we figure out how to walk out the like our own personal actions as people, like, God never misses that opportunity to grab that hand that we reach out. And I'm just super thankful with that, right? Like, because because we've all been the mom in different ways, right? Yeah. And that's something that we spend so much time thinking about the kids, the mama, the son, the daughter, that and we don't realize that we've been that mom, but we have, just maybe in some other ways, or maybe in the same way. Maybe, there's so many people watching this that maybe have been the addict, right? And so, so it's interesting. I think what makes this film interesting is that we can relate from so many perspectives. I can relate to the sister as the parent. I can relate as, to Mamaw. I can relate to the mom. I can relate to the kid as the fixer. It's like, Marika, Travis, she can relate to the girlfriend in Yale, right? Yeah. Like that he's trying
Absolutely.
to protect. It's just like there's so many things. Like, even to that scene, like I said, with him, like trying to put use 7 different credit cards to pay for something. Like, man, I've been there. Like, when you're broke, right? Like, it's one of those things, and that's why I think the hallmark of a great movie is the ability to relate to it. And when you relate to it, it creates that emotional connection that not every film has. So I definitely 100% recommend this film. I think it's, don't buy the political thing around it. Don't let politics ruin really emotional story.
Oh, look for it.
Yeah, definitely check it out and do some analysis on your own part. But I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you guys for digging in deep, figuring out what this movie really is about. My coffee has long gone, and but that's okay. I had a good cup. I had a good conversation. I appreciate it. And we're going to be back. There you go. You came prepared, Rory.
They're both empty.
That's it. That's it. So looking forward to next time with you guys. Thank you so much.
All right.